Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we're dissecting the story of a corporate giant that wants to find an entire industry, a name so powerful it became a verb for capturing life's most precious moments. We're talking about the Eastman Kodak Company. For over a century, a Kodak moment was part of our global vocabulary. At its peak in 1997, Kodak was worth an incredible $31 billion, dominating the photography market with an iron grip. By some estimates in the mid-70s, it controlled 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States. Its iconic yellow and red logo was a worldwide symbol of trust and quality. Yet, just 15 years after its peak, in 2012, this seemingly invincible titan filed for bankruptcy. The company that taught the world how to photograph its memories had failed to see the picture of its own future. This is the cautionary tale of Kodak's monumental rise and its tragic, self-inflicted fall. The story begins with a visionary entrepreneur, George Eastman. In 1888, he founded the Eastman Kodak Company with a simple, yet revolutionary mission: to make photography as convenient as the pencil. Back then, photography was a messy, complicated affair for professionals only. Eastman wanted to put a camera in everyone's hands. His first masterstroke was the Kodak camera, released in 1888. It was a simple box camera that came preloaded with a roll of film capable of taking 100 pictures. But the genius wasn't just the camera, it was the business model. For $25, you bought the camera. Once you'd taken all 100 shots, you mailed the entire device back to the company headquarters in Rochester, New York. For an extra $10, Kodak would develop the film, print your photos, and send them back to you along with your camera, now reloaded with a fresh roll of film. This became known as the razor and blades model. The initial product, the razor, or in this case the camera, is sold at a reasonable price, but the real recurring profit comes from the consumable blades, the film and processing services. This model was the financial engine of Kodak for the next 100 years. The success was supercharged in 1900 with the introduction of the Brownie camera. It was marketed to everyone, including women and children, and cost just $1. It sold 250,000 units in its first year alone. The Brownie democratized photography, introducing the world to the concept of the snapshot and turning a niche hobby into a global cultural phenomenon. Kodak didn't rest on its laurels. Throughout the 20th century, it innovated relentlessly within its film-based world. In 1935, it introduced Kodachrome, the first commercially successful amateur color film. In 1942, it launched Kodacolor, the world's first true color negative film for still photography. The company's Kodak Moment ad campaigns were so effective they became permanently embedded in popular culture, forever linking the brand with the emotional act of preserving memories. Kodak was on top of the world. But ironically, the seeds of its own destruction were being sown within its own state-of-the-art research labs. In 1975, a young Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson achieved something incredible. He invented the world's first digital camera. It was a crude prototype about the size of a toaster. It captured a grainy 0.01 megapixel black and white image and took 23 seconds to record it onto a standard cassette tape. It was a clunky, slow proof of concept, but it was a glimpse into a filmless future. When Sasson presented his groundbreaking invention to Kodak's management, their reaction was famously underwhelming. The response has been paraphrased as, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." This wasn't because they were ignorant. It was because they were terrified. Kodak's entire empire was built on that high-margin razor and blades model of selling film and processing. Filmless photography was a direct threat to their primary source of revenue. The fear of cannibalizing their own cash cow was paralyzing. A 1979 internal report at Kodak actually predicted, with alarming accuracy, that digital photography would overtake film and that this transition would happen around the year 2010. They saw the storm coming, but they chose to believe they could control it, that the transition would be slow and that they could manage it without sacrificing their film business. To be fair, Kodak didn't entirely bury its head in the sand. The company continued to invest in digital research. By 1986, it had developed a 1.4 megapixel sensor, a massive leap forward. Throughout the 1990s, it even produced a series of professional digital SLR cameras, starting with the pioneering DCS-100 in 1991, built on a modified Nikon camera body. Kodak also amassed over 1,000 patents related to digital imaging. The innovation was happening. The problem was a lack of strategic vision from the top. The leadership remained emotionally and financially wedded to the film business. Digital was seen as a side project, a potential threat to be managed rather than a revolutionary opportunity to be seized. They viewed the world through a film-tinted lens, believing that the quality of digital would take decades to match film and that consumers would never abandon the physical prints they loved. While Kodak hesitated, its competitors seized the moment. Companies like Fuji, Sony, and Canon saw the digital writing on the wall. They weren't held back by the legacy of a wildly profitable film business, so they could invest aggressively in digital cameras with a clear and urgent vision for the future. Fuji, Kodak's chief rival in the film market, proved to be particularly astute. While Kodak doubled down on protecting its film empire, Fuji made a brilliant strategic pivot. It recognized that the impending death of film meant it needed to diversify. Leveraging its deep expertise in chemical engineering and material science, the very skills that made it good at producing film, Fuji expanded into new high-growth markets like pharmaceuticals, medical imaging, and cosmetics. This foresight allowed Fuji to not only survive the digital revolution, but to emerge as a stronger, more resilient company. Then, as the 2000s began, the digital tsunami that Kodak's own report had predicted finally hit. The quality of digital cameras exploded, while prices plummeted. Consumers fell in love with the new technology. The convenience was undeniable. You could see your picture instantly on an LCD screen, delete bad shots, store thousands of photos on a tiny memory card, and share them online with friends and family across the world in seconds. The Kodak moment was being replaced by the Facebook post and the Instagram story. Kodak's attempts to compete in the consumer digital camera market were a classic case of too little, too late. They did produce some popular models, like the EasyShare line, which focused on easy photo transfer to computers. But they were constantly playing catch-up. By the time Kodak announced a major strategic shift towards digital in 2003, the market was already crowded and fiercely competitive. The window of opportunity to lead the revolution had slammed shut. Kodak's failure wasn't just about being late to the digital party. It was a cascade of strategic blunders rooted in a deep corporate complacency. One of the most significant missteps was the failure to properly monetize its vast portfolio of over 1,000 digital imaging patents. These patents were a potential goldmine. The company could have licensed this technology to its competitors, creating a massive new revenue stream from the very digital cameras that were killing its film business. This is what companies like ARM Holdings do with microchip designs. But Kodak was reluctant. It feared that licensing its technology would only accelerate the decline of its film sales by making its competitors' cameras better. This short-sightedness deprived Kodak of billions in potential income and allowed rivals to develop their own technologies without penalty. Furthermore, Kodak's attempts to diversify were often poorly executed. Unlike Fuji's strategic pivot into related fields, Kodak's ventures into areas like chemicals and healthcare were often unfocused and costly distractions. They diverted precious resources and management attention away from the core crisis in their imaging business at the worst possible time. But perhaps the most damaging factor of all was Kodak's corporate culture. Decades of market dominance had bred an institutional arrogance and a profound aversion to risk. Success had become a prison. The management structure was filled with executives who had built their careers on the success of the film business. Their bonuses, their identities, and their worldview were all tied to the razor and blades model. They were psychologically incapable of embracing a future that rendered their past successes obsolete. This paralysis of success made them blind to the seismic shifts happening with their own customers and in the market at large. The company was so focused on protecting its existing business that it completely missed the new, much larger business that was emerging right in front of it. By the early 2010s, the end was near. Film sales, once the lifeblood of the company, had evaporated. The digital camera division was burning through cash, unable to turn a consistent profit in a low-margin, highly competitive market. In January 2012, the unthinkable happened. The Eastman Kodak Company, a 130-year-old icon of American industry, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The news sent shockwaves through the business world, serving as the ultimate cautionary tale that no company, no matter how powerful, is too big to fail. In the years since, Kodak has undergone a painful and dramatic transformation. To emerge from bankruptcy, it sold off many of its assets, including its portfolio of digital patents, for a mere $525 million, a fraction of what they could have been worth. Its consumer film and paper divisions were spun off into a separate company called Kodak Alaris, which continues to sell the iconic film stocks that photographers still love. The company that emerged is a shadow of its former self. Today, the new Kodak is a much smaller B2B company focused on commercial printing, packaging, and professional services. It has even ventured into producing advanced materials for other industries, including pharmaceuticals, an echo of the strategy Fuji used to save itself decades earlier. While the global Kodak moment is a thing of the past, the lessons from its collapse are more relevant than ever. The rise and fall of Kodak is a timeless narrative about the critical importance of adaptability, foresight, and the courage to embrace radical change. The first and most vital lesson is, don't be afraid to cannibalize your own business. Kodak's fear of disrupting its profitable film division was its fatal flaw. In today's world of rapid technological advancement, you must be willing to make your own products obsolete. Because if you don't disrupt yourself, a competitor will do it for you. The second lesson is about the power of corporate culture. Kodak's culture of complacency and risk aversion choked off innovation. To survive and thrive today, businesses must foster a culture that encourages new ideas, tolerates failure as a part of learning, and rewards forward thinking, even when it challenges the status quo. The third lesson is to listen, truly listen, to your customers. Kodak's leadership was so fixated on its internal business model that it lost touch with what consumers actually wanted. The digital revolution wasn't just about technology. It was driven by a fundamental consumer demand for convenience, speed, and shareability. Kodak was selling film. The world wanted to share memories instantly. Finally, the future belongs to the bold. George Eastman built his empire by taking huge risks and betting on a new, unproven technology to make photography accessible. Ironically, it was the absence of that same boldness in his successors that brought the empire crashing down. In a world of constant change, the biggest risk is often the failure to take any risk at all. In the end, the story of Kodak is a tragedy. It's the tale of a company that literally invented the future, holding the first digital camera in its hands in 1975, but then chose to live in the past. The Kodak moment may be gone, but the powerful lessons it taught will surely endure. Thanks for listening to G Fun Facts Online.